sensitive topic. We're here with Dr. Brian Ardis. We're going to be talking about moving beyond COVID-19. The world has gone through a major tragedy over the last 4 years, and this tragedy has come through with a veiling of lies and superstitions and belief systems. And we're going to be cracking through some of this today, and we're getting down to some of the most practical things that you can do. Whether you've been dealing with COVID-19 yourself, or you've had family members that have been dealing with it, or loved ones. There are practical solutions in this book, and I'm going to want you to pick it up and grab it. We're going to be talking with Dr. Brian Ardis here today, and we're just going to dig in and see what we can figure out and how you can help yourself. It's going to be a great interview. So Brian, you're a chiropractor, retired, and tell me a little bit about your practice. Like, why did you get into medicine?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the entire reason why I ever got into medicine in the first place, I was actually most interested in being a basketball player and going off to college and playing basketball, and the ultimate dream was to be in the NBA. That's really what I was consumed with every day. Until I had a younger sister when I was 21 years old get diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called systemic lupus erythematosus. Mm-hmm. And after her plight and after her symptoms and suffering for 6 months, she had actually gone through 3 one-month stints in 3 different hospital systems in Dallas, Texas. The first 2 after a month stay, had no idea what was wrong with her and what was creating pain all over her body. The third hospital was Scottish Rite's Hospital. They decided to do a muscle biopsy of her thigh at 11 years old that no other hospital had done yet, and then told my parents that she had been diagnosed with a very rare autoimmune disease called lupus, and told her these promises: there is no known cause and there is no known cure for her condition, and she will live with this for the rest of her life. We don't know what causes it, must maybe be hereditary, but told her because there is no known cure for her condition, there were 3 prescription drugs she would have to live on for the rest of her life. And in fact, the medical doctor told my parents that those 3 drugs in combination would destroy her liver and kidneys over time, and she would not live most likely into her 40s. And one of those drugs would actually cause infertility and stillbirths, so she would never be a mother. That was her future. In the medical profession, they call that your prognosis. This is what your future looks like. And when my parents came home and told me this was the summary of what her problem was and her suffering, I actually looked at my parents and I said, I am not letting that profession kill my sister, because they don't know what's wrong with her and they don't know how to fix it.
How old were you when this happened?
21.
21. And so at 21, you're in college, you're deciding which direction you're going to go.
Yes.
You were in sports, but sciences as well?
No, actually I didn't really want to be in science. I didn't want to be a doctor of any kind. I didn't want to do anything in health. I actually preferred art and sports over all things.
So then how did you make the bridge to become a doctor?
The second part of the promise to my parents was, I'm not letting that profession kill my sister, is what I said, because they don't know what's wrong with her. We're just going to drug her. Oh, and it's going to end her life and shorten her life and make her never have a family. That was not okay for me. As an older brother of 5 kids, I always took on that mantle of protection. Yeah. So I actually told my parents, just because that profession doesn't know what's wrong with her doesn't mean someone doesn't. So I'm going to go figure out which professions heal people or know how to heal people and can help us figure out what the solution is for her. And if I can't find those people, then I'll do it. So I went off to chiropractic school, acupuncture school, nutrition school.
But why, you chose natural medicine as opposed to allopathic. What was what was that journey?
Yeah, so I went off into college, started taking all the massive amounts of science courses that were required for a pre-med student. I decided I guess I'd go to med school, but just because this profession didn't have answers for my sister, I figured they had research groups who were researching causes of illnesses and diseases, so I decided I was going to be a medical researcher. That was what I thought I was going to do. So when I get to BYU and I'm in my pre-med program, I decide I'm going to go start looking at all the greatest medical schools in the country. And at the time, in 1999, it was the University of Utah was ranked 4th in the country as a medical school. So I decided from BYU in Provo, Utah, I was going to go up to Salt Lake City to the University of Utah, and I wanted to actually survey some of their research facilities and see, what do you guys do in the realm of medical research and looking for the causes of diseases? You know what I was shocked by? I was actually brought up to speed on the fact that research facilities and universities and medical schools are primarily funded by big pharma,
Sure.
pharmaceutical companies, to pay these students to investigate new drugs and the dosing of those drugs that are a lethal dose to the animal, which precedes human clinical trials.
Sure.
And that is primarily where all the funding and research goes for medicine. So the lack of research into the underlying causes of diseases ultimately took me away from medical school, and why it is I decided to go look at what were called alternative healing modalities, chiropractic, acupuncture, and nutrition.
Okay, this makes sense to me. I was looking for a way to tie this in because you're a chiropractor, but you're coming out with a lot of research data. And that's, not the typical chiropractic path. It's usually physical medicine, very active, very, very motion driven, but you're coming at it from a standpoint of research.
Absolutely.
So you had a couple practices, very, very large. You had a large practice base, 16,000 patients, right?
Yes.
And what did you learn in your practice, or what did you see recurring in your practice that led you to start thinking about things like this?
Yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to know was, is it true that a human being can actually recover or heal from a medical diagnosis? This was what I needed to find out. Is this true? Can my sister, for example, who had 10 years of normal life with no symptoms, and then at 10 and a half years old, starts developing joint pain in her hands and all over her body to where she can't even sit up out of bed, and my dad had to put her on a stretcher because she couldn't sit up out in her bed before she ended up in these 3 months worth of hospitals. I want to know, is it true that a medical condition which has been diagnosed and told is for life and cannot be reversed, are there actually people who've been able to help people reverse their conditions? So I decided to use patients in my own practices to see if this was true. Can I use the principles I learned in chiropractic school, acupuncture school, nutrition and detoxification?
So what you're saying
heal them.
is your patient base was your education.
100%.
Ironically, that's my background is my 10,000 active patients became my schooling. And so I completely relate to that. So from a research perspective, what were the patterns that you started to see?
Yeah, there was an overriding theme of 8 basic things I could identify that was creating everybody's symptoms that were then being categorized into a medical diagnosis.
Sure. And so the word diagnosis, before we go any further, what does that mean to you?
So a diagnosis is just a summary with a name the medical profession gives you to summarize what it is your collection of symptoms is going to be termed.
So diagnosis, 2 words, di means two, and also di has a phonetic saying, which is die, and agnosis is to tell a lie. So diagnosis actually literally comes from the etymology of it is where two tell a lie. Amen. And you die.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So the diagnosis path. Were you rejecting diagnosis, or were you actively diagnosing?
No, I was not actively diagnosing. I was looking for the root causes of illnesses.
Okay, good. So we're definitely on the same path here, and I'm just trying to put together the pieces to see how you got to this point.
Sure.
I mean, I went through my own journey trying to figure this out, and I realized that diagnoses were limited, were restricting people's ability to see solutions, and limited it to the belief system around that diagnosis. And the diagnoses were a major part of the problem. So you were finding this. Now, you said there were 8 things that were leading to health issues. Is it that simple?
I found it that simple to help the majority of all people that came into my practice from 16 different countries around the world.
So what are those 8 things?
So the 8 things were some food they were either having a allergy reaction to or were sensitive to, and we did that simply through food allergy testing.
Yeah.
And then
like ALCAT testing, that kind of thing?
Like stool sample testing.
Okay. Yeah.
So we could identify, are you allergic to something, sensitive to something, and is that creating inflammation in your body, summarizing your symptoms they've given you a diagnosis of?
Yeah.
No matter what the condition is. So we found food allergies were an issue, and the top 4 primary foods we found people were sensitive to or had reactions to that were being misdiagnosed as a medical condition were corn, dairy, wheat, and soy reactions. So those are the primary 4 we found in most people. Not all of them, most of them, and most of you at home. And then we found that number 2 were pathogens that could get into the body. So pathogens would represent things like bacteria, viruses, funguses, parasites, literal invaders that were growing in the body.
Sure.
Then we identified those and helped eliminate those, and then the patient's symptoms would disappear. It was great.
Now, yeah, actually,
That's number 2.
you made a point here, just to stop you for a second, because you also were acupuncture. So your thought is flow,
Absolutely.
restore flow. So that's why.
100%.
So they're getting caught up, and that's where the pathogens were getting caught up.
Absolutely.
Okay. So number 3.
And then number 3 were toxic chemical buildup in the tissues of the human body. And those toxins could be anything from prescription medications to aspartame in processed foods. I mean, there's lots of examples. Dyes, colors, things in chemtrails, you name it.
Sure. So
chemical exposure building up in the human body can lead to symptoms.
in all tissues, or were you testing specifically? Was it you were testing fascia or organs or?
Yeah, I was using applied kinesiology principles
Sure.
to actually analyze using acupuncture principles specific regions of the exterior of the body energetically that are tied to organs in the human body. So I could literally assess the health of all organs internally.
Fantastic. Okay, number 4.
Number 4 is heavy metal poisoning.
Yeah.
And that would be things like arsenic, cadmium, barium.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of mercury, aluminum.
And that's a tough one right now to deal with because it's everywhere. It's in the water. I mean, I travel. I've been on a world tour, and I carry shower filters with me,
Love it.
and wrenches, which I get taken away at airports quite often, because I mean, if it's touching our skin, it's in our body.
Amen.
So heavy metals, 5.
And then number 5 is scar tissue.
Yeah.
And this is scar tissue on the external part of the body that impacts acupuncture meridian flow.
So stopping, yeah. So like in sports performance, we would remediate a scar so that a muscle function would go better, and also so the meridian would flow.
Exactly right.
So scar tissue, yeah.
And so for examples for
tattoos?
those watching, and tattoos
Tattoos are scars.
are scars.
Yeah. Okay.
And then also there's inks with chemicals inside there could also create a problem.
Which drives it. You know, it's funny because one of the best tattoo artists in the world lives here in Orange County, and I interviewed him a while ago, and it was quite the journey to find out the thoughts behind what they do. That's a whole other story. So now we get to number 6.
Oh, well, let's speak about scars. Just, I'd just like to answer this for you because most people may not know this. It's very simple. There's a whole lot of women in this world who, after giving birth to children, will actually blame a child for their health issues. It was that kid when that kid was born. Ever since then, I can't control my weight. I can't remember anything, names, numbers, faces, you name it. It's all because of that kid. And the truth is, it had nothing to do with the kid taking the minerals and vitamins out of your body while you were pregnant. It's actually a C-section scar, a episiotomy tear, or a perineal tear.
Yeah, C-sections. I mean, we focus a lot on C-sections. Our audience is really heavily on that.
Good.
8% of C-sections are medically sustainable. They should be done. And we're at 38%, and we all know why. It's the placenta.
So this meridian that goes up the front line of your body, just audiences know, you're not the only one that knows this, thank God. But it is massively involved scars along the midline, impacting thyroid function, heart function, and brain function.
Yeah. So C-sections is a big one, and also the kids have contracted cranial bones. The frontal suture doesn't move. There's diminished blood flow to the front brain, causing ADD, ADHD. So that, I mean, we actually have a solution for it, which we publicly share with everybody.
And that goes to number 6.
6.
Number 6 is misalignments of bones in the body. So you can have misalignments in the spine, misalignment of the cranial bones, but absolutely a misaligned vertebrae, misaligned bone joint can actually create symptoms.
Sure. Okay.
And disease.
And I mean, this is a whole conversation that we could probably have, because bones don't touch except for the teeth, the rib cage, and the ears. So our bones actually structure.
That's exactly right.
And then what do bones do if they're not structured?
So what holds them in their position, right? This is where you get into the fascia.
Fascia, right? Yeah. I mean, that's our whole world.
100%.
So we definitely agree with that. And the density of bones are, I always found it interesting. You have 226 bones, half of them are in your hands and your feet. You've got 640 muscles or so, and half of them are from your neck up. Receivers, transceivers, sending and receiving and processing.
It's all about the information and signals along the neurological systems of the body that are completely impacted by fascia.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So, and now 7.
The number 7, you're looking at emotional traumas or buried traumas in the psyche.
So what is a trauma?
So a trauma would be anything from, there's millions of them, but any emotional trauma can have stored in the subconscious,
Yeah.
and you have what's called in the medical profession, they'll term it a psychosomatic response, a mental, emotional reaction that creates a physical symptom or change in the body.
What would you consider to be the subconscious?
What would I consider it to be?
Yeah, like if you talk about the subconscious, where do you place that in the human body?
Oh, so, well, actually, it can be tied to your spirit. It can be tied to the mind physically as they want you to perceive that it is. But your mind literally is connected to mind, heart, soul, spirit. It's connected to every single cell of your entire body.
So would you say that the subconscious is the body and the mind is the conscious?
If that's easier for people to grasp, sure.
Okay. Yeah, just looking for a way to contextualize it, because
no worries.
subconscious is one of these nebulous things that's used in medicine, but very, it's not very well defined. I mean, everything has cellular memory, and
Sure.
the body's intelligent. The fascia has 100 trillion nerve cells, which is horsepower. The brain has 100 billion. So, I mean, this audience has been trained or taught to see the body as a computer and the brain as a processor, not a computer. It runs programs.
Love it.
And so the subconscious is the body, and the conscious is the access of that subconscious programming.
I love it. So I used a technique I preferred in practice, but there's many of them, but I used a technique called the emotion code by Dr. Bradley Nelson.
Yeah, motion code is great.
And it is just a very simple, quick way to analyze some of those deep-seated emotional burdens on the mind or on the soul or on the spirit that physically has an impact on us. And there are so many conditions that we saw literally stop within minutes of doing the emotion code work.
I started and implemented that in practice with our chiropractors, doctors, and physical medicine doctors.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. It was a very quick and easy way to understand. Yeah. So I really do like that.
In fact, there's a year that you mentioned to me earlier, in 2008.
8.
That's when Dr. Bradley Nelson and I met in San Francisco and actually had him train me over a 3-day period by himself
Oh, that's
to
fantastic.
teach me how to do his actual techniques.
Okay, so and then number 8.
And then number 8. There are more than these, I'm sure, but 8 was one of my favorites, and that's mineral and vitamin deficiencies.
That's what we focus on.
Very good.
Yeah, I mean that's the primary driver. That's the one that we get censored for, and you know that when you get censored for it, you're at the target. So
Amen.
yeah, so I'll tell you what we found actually, and I think this will lead to the next steps is what to do about it. What we found is that the barium, strontium, aluminum that's present in the skies, it's all over the world. Barium depletes the body silica, and our primary element is silica. And without silica, calphos, selenium, everything, it doesn't quite absorb properly. And that means we have malabsorption of minerals, which then causes malabsorption of water. And then it starts the whole compensatory actions of the body. The body starts compensating, trying to figure out hormone dysregulation, thyroid dysregulation. But the one thing that was missing, because we were talking predominantly to an educated, healthy audience, and they were taking minerals, and they were still having problems. And what we found is 600 milligrams of silica to combat the deficiencies that are being driven by basically just inhaling and breathing right now.
It's incredible.
So minerals, and so with this, these are the answers. So I'm guessing that as we get down here, we're talking about COVID-19 a little bit.
We are.
So what's so different about COVID-19? Is it a flu?
No, there's a few things, even just basic minerals that most people may not even know. Most people have heard that as a result of having either COVID-19 and being diagnosed now with a new cardiovascular condition like blood clotting, hypertension, aneurysm, strokes, all of these can actually be directed to actually what was COVID-19 that made you sick.
Yeah.
And what was found in COVID-19 through DNA testing were these little snippets of proteins that were making your cells deplete themselves of zinc and copper.
Sure.
You know what happens when you deplete the human body of copper?
Electricity issues.
All kinds of electrical circuitry issues, but also it weakens the vascular muscle walls of all your blood vessels and arteries.
Sure.
So as they weaken, because they lose copper, the muscle integrity is lost and they begin to expand. That expansion is called aneurysms.
So and this is from the virus or from the medical solution to the virus?
Yeah, we can basically ignore the virus aspect of this COVID-19 pandemic
good.
because the virus has never been substantiated anyway.
So okay, we're on the same path. So I mean, do you go as far as say, does a virus exist?
Yeah, actually, do you know what the Latin definition of the word virus is? It's actually poison, comma, especially of snake's venom.
Right. And this is where we get into.
And this is historical. This isn't like in the past. We're talking about now. I actually walk around with 1980s and 1990s Latin to English dictionaries, and I make audiences open it and read the definition of the word virus in Latin to English. And it still is poison, not something you naturally find in nature, except venom is found in nature, but it's poison, comma, especially of snake's venom. And they have been manufacturing synthetic venom proteins from venomous creatures all over the world for 3 huge industries that you and I were never told about in chiropractic school. Ever.
Tell me.
And these 3 industries are drugs and vaccines, insecticides, and cosmetics.
Right. Yeah. And it's basically what we put in our body, what we put on our face, and what we use to solve supposedly a medical condition.
Exactly right.
So, I mean, I'm pretty public to say that really the issue is we're being poisoned.
We were all poisoned.
Yeah. And we're like
the entire world.
We're like roughly the 4th generation of being poisoned.
Yes. Now, one of the things I want to make sure people understand from the book, most people are sick and tired of COVID-19 discussion as a whole.
Yeah.
They literally pummeled us 24/7 for 4 years straight about this COVID-19 bat virus. A bat coughed in China and made the whole world sick.
Yeah.
Really? Truly? You can let that go. That never really happened. What was happening was they were spreading poisons around the world that mimic what looks like they define a respiratory virus. So you saw lowering oxygen levels, cough, fever, and then you threw in weird symptoms you never saw before, loss of taste and smell, ringing in the ears, and then brain fog. What is my problem and why I wrote this book? After COVID-19 was dismissed in May of 2023, I knew it was pertinent to write this book because the very next year, 2024, our United States government decided to publish a document. And that document's titled Long-Term Health Effects of COVID. And they summarize that people who had COVID, mild cases in the United States and around the world, they have now published there are over 200 lingering symptoms and new medically diagnosed illnesses that are now called long COVID. And these are actually, you can now code these on insurance claims to insurance providers to cover your long COVID now diagnosis.
Sure, and we're just setting up a cascading series of issues. It's very much like an inflammatory, like a cytokine storm in a body. We're setting up this inflammatory issues that the body has to then figure out, and there's a lot of talk about it. But what is the actual answer in your opinion? What is working?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you. All right, so there are a summary of 200 lingering problems from having COVID. That is not the COVID-19 vaccine injured. That is only those who got COVID and have had lingering health issues ever since. So anybody around the world watching this, if you're at home and you know somebody who has a new medical diagnosis or a new symptom of any kind they did not have before 2020, I know what's causing your symptoms. And I know what the antidote is. And I've listed them out in this book for you. There are 200 combined symptoms and medical diagnoses that were created by 36 different man-made poisons that were found in every COVID-19 patient's blood, urine, and feces. Do you know what those poisons were? Does your medical doctor know there was more than one bat virus?
Sure.
No. There was actually 36 different poisons confirmed in the blood, urine, and feces of all people who have COVID or long COVID or vaccine injured. And when you know what that list of those poisons are, which I lay out in the book, I also published for you what are the published, researched prescription medications that are the cure to those poisons, and the all-natural antidotes, either herbs, minerals, vitamins, or homeopathic remedies.
So basically what we're saying is that people are symptomatic, they have an issue, whether they've had a vaccine or not, and I'm assuming that you're where I'm at, which is the body actually is the curative mechanism, like the body cures itself. But sometimes we need to give a little help.
Absolutely.
And what you're suggesting is that regardless of these, you can go and take something natural as a remedy.
Absolutely.
So how does somebody, do they have to find out? Or do they just start randomly taking it? Is it testing that you're wanting people to do?
So there are tests that I lay out in the book for every single symptom, every single poison that has been identified that you can have your medical doctor order through a lab.
And you can just walk into your medical doctor, ask them to order? What if they're not?
Absolutely.
What if the doctor's non-compliant?
Well, then you go find another doctor.
Yeah. I mean, are in the United States right now, are doctors willing to do this?
Yes.
Okay. So
And if a doctor you have that's in your network and insurance looks at you and says, we're not running that test or we're not doing that, you have the option to go find another one.
Sure.
I'm going to show you all the evidence in here that this is what you need to test for. And I'm not saying you need to do a lab test. I actually lay out for you what are the symptoms created by each of those poisons so you know which next action steps to take. And if your symptoms start to resolve, you were right on target.
Okay, and that's even more important. It's like you don't need to go back into the system, because I fundamentally have an issue with going into the system because of, even if I go in for one thing, it's like the best example is I go in to get my brakes done. And then all of a sudden I've got something on the router, I've got something in my engine, I've got another thing, and it just keeps adding on and on and on. And that's, so I would always resist going in and getting stuff worked on my car, because if I wasn't willing to do it all. And that's kind of what it's like going into medicine. You find things that maybe aren't even something that you need to worry about, which then put a lot of energy on that. So basically, people can go through the book, they can look at their symptoms, the symptoms that they're having, and they can go apply a natural remedy to that. And if that natural remedy, if they have a change in that symptomatic process, then they know they're on board.
Exactly right. So let me give you an example of some.
Yeah, please.
Would you like some real obvious solutions that people can actually start applying in their life right now? All right, so how many people got the COVID-19 vaccines or got COVID and now have been diagnosed with a condition called myocarditis?
Sure, yes. That's
Myo is Latin for muscle, cardia is heart, itis is inflammation of. But with myocarditis, you actually have scarring and damage to the heart muscle itself.
Sure.
You can see it with ultrasound. If you or a loved one's been diagnosed with myocarditis after COVID, after the COVID-19 vaccines, there is actually one published cure in 3 days, and it was published in 2021.
And what was that?
And it's nicotine.
Right, which is something that people have been taught is super bad for them, super addictive, but it's been used forever, all the way back to ancient practices. One of the most powerful things that you can use. And that nicotine is also good for things like cancer.
Absolutely.
So how do they apply nicotine?
So nicotine can be applied, we laid out for you. You can either buy organic tobacco leaves and steep your own tea or brew of the tobacco leaf. And you can use that either in a foot soak, which is one of the ways we love doing this. We can take a patient with tachycardia, an insane, intensive pain in their chest and increased heart rate, and put their feet in tobacco water, and within 5 minutes reverse all of it and make it stop.
You know, it's funny because
4 months it will never return. It's incredible.
We use an essential oil with one of our partners called Essential Oil Wizardry. It's called Father's Love, and it's nicotine based. And we put it on the feet for tachycardia. That's one of the things that we do right now. And because the terpenes are absorbed through the oil, and it's just another delivery system. But that's really powerful. What about another one?
Yeah, so let's talk about nicotine though, because this is very important. Right now, there's 6% of all Americans still struggle with long COVID. That's like 20 to 30 million people, just in America, who right now, the government just published, will suffer with these symptoms for the next 10 to 14 years in that document. I take you through the document. So I just want you to know that in 2023, in January, a researcher named Mark Lemke took 4 of the worst long COVID symptoms patients he could and actually asked them to do one thing after a year and a half of having all of their symptoms. And those symptoms included loss of taste and smell, ringing in their ears, dementia, exercise-induced asthma, insomnia, couldn't sleep through the night, chest pain, heart arrhythmias. This was the list. And they had to have tried all kinds of drugs first, and therapies like occupational therapy and physical therapy for their conditions without any resolution of their problems for a year and a half. In January of 2023, they published. Mark Lemke asked them to do one thing and one thing only for 6 days, and let's see if we can make your year and a half worth of suffering go away. They asked them to wear a 7 milligram nicotine patch on their arm for 6 days only, putting a new one on every single day.
So I guess the people that are quitting smoking are probably the fastest ones that are through the diagnosis.
Actually, even better, did you know that smokers were the only people immune to COVID for the last 4 years? And that's published. I show you all the studies.
Wow. Okay. So that's actually great.
Yeah, smokers were those that use tobacco products.
You know, that goes to my brother-in-law, who is I mean, just a funny story. We were all at a family event, and norovirus got ravaged through everybody, and he was the only one that didn't get it. He smokes and he drinks Coke all day. He was the only one that wasn't healthy in the family. And I was just, so now you say that, I'm just laughing because that's ironic but true, right?
I've actually had medical doctors around the world who would have me on their platforms after a documentary I released 3 years ago called Watch the Water. And it was all exposing the poisons they're calling COVID and how nicotine was the antidote. Not just that I was claiming it was an antidote. DNA researchers figured out why it was nicotine was the cure in April of 2020, 4 months into the pandemic.
Sure.
And in France, they published, if all governments around the world will just use nicotine gum, patches, or tobacco products, you can end the pandemic within 2 weeks around the world.
You know, it's funny because, yeah, I mean, you technically you can't even, one of the ironic things is that you can't use a nicotine like patch or chew or anything that legally on an airplane in America. That you go to jail for it.
Well, it's getting even worse. I don't know if you saw this, but within 1 month of the Watch the Water documentary where I named nicotine as the antidote to COVID, and this was in February of 2022. This is almost 3 years ago. It actually is 3 years ago next month. I listed that as the antidote to COVID and all things COVID. It is still the #1 published cure for all long COVID patients is a nicotine patch, a nicotine gum, or using organic tobacco agents.
Right.
Okay. This is phenomenal. Within 1 month of that documentary dropping in March of 2022, the United States, Canada, the UK, New Zealand, and Australia all in unison in 1 week announced new health agendas for their country in the middle of a global pandemic emergency.
Right.
They announced the new national health agenda is we are going to now start taking actions to ban all nicotine products and tobacco products from our citizens commercially by the year 2030.
Sure.
So for the next 6 years now, they are going to be creating creative ways to make sure you don't have access to the one thing they know is the #1 published antidote to all viruses on Earth, including rabies and HIV. Did you know nicotine is a published cure for rabies and HIV and SARS-CoV-2? And do you know why?
Wow. I mean, there's not very often, I'll be honest, there's not very often that in a conversation like this that I'm learning, and I'm learning a lot right now, which I'm super excited about.
I love that.
I've used nicotine. I've used it for things, but not to the depth that you're talking about.
Sure.
Like, it's amazing.
It is amazing. And did you know that nicotine, by the way, is a published cure even from commercially available tobacco products? This is published all over the world. Did you know nicotine is a published cure for Parkinson's disease, MS, Alzheimer's, ulcerative colitis, all arthritises, all of them. Psoriatic, gout, osteo, rheumatoid. Did you know it's also a published cure? I already mentioned it, myocarditis. Did you know that during 2021, while we were all locked down at home during COVID-19, that our government in the United States was paying researchers to investigate 2 of the 36 poisons that were found in all COVID patients, and they injected them into mammals and created within 72 hours glioblastoma tumors.
Right.
And then they were paid by our government to see if they could reverse glioblastoma tumor formation that they created in 3 days or less. And do you know what they dissolved within 72 hours glioblastoma tumors with? Nicotine.
And the best delivery system, would you say steeping it and feet?
Yes, steeping it. I love organic tobacco products in general. So using the plant-based nicotine is always the best in my opinion. But if you can do teas, great. Use the water, great. Use the tobacco leaves, great. Foot,
Yeah.
you can do it. But I will say this. The nicotine patches deliver a small dose of nicotine over a 24-hour period versus like chewing the gum, sucking on the pouches.
Sure.
And nicotine is a massively powerful detoxer of poisons.
Do you think that nicotine that the patch is better than, just out of your own research, patch is better than the soak and the tea?
I believe it's more controllable using the patches.
Yeah, just because you have a more controllable dose over time.
Yes.
So your body's not upregulating, downregulating, and acting on it, right?
Absolutely.
Interesting.
So just so you know, I wear a 3.5 size milligram nicotine patch every single day, and I will for the rest of my life. because of what I've learned in the last 2 years.
And so at what point do you not need to, though? Like, why would you do it for the rest of your life?
This is great. So I'm about to teach you something else you may not know.
Sure, I'm open.
So I just mentioned a whole bunch of medical conditions that are improved with nicotine or prevented or cured and published to do so. Did you know that autism traits,
Yeah.
they've already investigated nicotine patches between the shoulder blades of all children and adults, and within 7 days they see improvements in all their symptoms? All of them. So I want to explain something to you.
You mean like, you're talking like T6 area? That kind of area?
Yeah, right between the shoulder blades is where they'll go, and that's not because of T6.
Heart meridian, I'm just saying area, heart meridian.
Yeah, exactly. But that's not why they put it there. Actually, as I was reading the studies, I was like, there's no way they got autistic children and adults who are super sensitive to everything tactile-wise. There's no way they put a nicotine patch on them and they tolerated it unless they put it between their shoulder blades. And then as I was reading the studies, I was like, genius. They couldn't get it off between their shoulder blades. That's why they stuck it there.
Oh, right.
So that had nothing to do with meridians, although it would be beneficial. Okay, so I want to see if you know this. Do you know what the second most containing nicotine food on Earth is?
What?
Eggplant. Do you know what the third highest containing nicotine food on Earth is?
I have no idea.
Tomatoes. Red tomatoes.
Yes, of course. So, so like Gundry's attack on red tomatoes, right?
Amen. Do you know what the fourth highest containing nicotine food on Earth is? White potatoes.
Wow.
So when you're looking at me and asking about tobacco products and using tobacco plants, foot soaks, herbs, you name it, you actually can eat nicotine, and you should be all day long. And you know what's amazing? I just mentioned that nicotine is published to reverse all arthritis, pain, and inflammation. Do you know what the first thing is your medical doctors are taught, rheumatologists are taught to tell their patients when they are diagnosed with any kind of arthritis? They're told to take a steroid for the rest of their life. They blame it on genetics, all of their suffering and pain. And then the next words out of their mouth is, make sure you don't eat nightshade vegetables. They can increase your pain.
Of course.
Do you know nightshade vegetables is the second highest containing food group with nicotine?
Right.
Which has 4 times more anti-inflammatory benefits than inflammatory? We've all been lied to. They get to sell you a whole lot of drugs by convincing you not to trust those vegetables.
You know, it's been, I mean, listen, I my whole life I've been a vicious carnivore, and I went plant-based. I did a 44-day fast in 2020, and it changed my life. And then for 2 years I fasted between 10 days and 3 weeks every month. And I just wanted to see how far I could take it. And of course, like everything else, the education about what is healthy for us is completely manipulated. And there's all these trends and these fads. Plants are the cure; they're the medicine. And fruit is definitely so important for the body. And currently, adding things like the nightshades, like you were talking about, I have noticed that they've been taken out. I've also noticed that we've been demonizing fruits as sugar, which is a horrible demonization.
100%.
So, outside of getting the book, if first of all, is this available? Where is it available?
Yeah, so you can get this at thedrardisshow.com, thedrardisshow.com. It's also available on Amazon. It's a bestseller there. It's on barnesandnoble.com.
Yeah.
So you can go get them there. Absolutely.
And what are some simple things? Like if somebody's looking at watching this today, what's the one thing that you want them to go out and do?
Actually, can I do 2?
Okay, 2.
All right, so let's talk about blood clots and the COVID-19 and the COVID-19 vaccines. Number 1, you've heard a reference, most likely everyone around the world, if they know somebody who's been injured and they started becoming awake to maybe they weren't told the truth about the safety and efficacy of these vaccines. You're awake now. Did you know that there is no mRNA in any of the COVID-19 vaccines?
Right.
That is not what is to blame for all the myocarditis, blood clots, and deaths and miscarriages. So I want to speak to, you're going to get what it is that's in the shots. I show you from our government websites what it is they actually put in the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines that is creating the effects of blood clots, and let's talk about miscarriages.
Yeah.
These are 2 big ones.
Yeah.
We could talk about turbo cancers, but I covered it in the book. Let's talk about blood clots for real life scenarios. If you now suffer with a blood clotting disorder, and you've been diagnosed with one since having COVID or being vaccinated for COVID, you're going to be put on things like Eliquis, you're going to be put things on heparin, warfarin, Coumadin, you name it. Well, I just need you all to be aware that none of those are published to reverse those blood clotting effects of these poisons
Sure.
that are in all of the vaccines and those sick with COVID. However, there is something that was published by our government in 2006 that does cure the blood clots in a human created by those poisons. And I show you the research studies. And guess what it's found in? Licorice root extract.
It's always the simplest.
It's always the simplest thing.
It's always the simplest cures. I mean, one thing that I've been really adamant is telling people that fundamentally we have an issue, and I decided to stop being a practitioner because of this issue. Is that 85% of care was delivered by moms and by grandmothers in the neighborhoods 50 years ago, and today over 95% of care is delivered by single source. And you can't corrupt everybody all the time, but if you centralize the information, then you can corrupt it. And that's what's happened, is all of the simple natural issues have been taken out.
I want to talk about infertility real quick, because there's actually a massive agenda hidden within the vaccine agendas, all of them.
First statement.
To create miscarriages and infertility, to control population control. This is the whole thing. So I just want you guys to understand that there's a lot of people in Canada. It was reported up to 90% of all those who were pregnant and got the COVID-19 vaccines actually lost their children. Those were some of the stats coming out of Canada alone. So in the book, I actually outlined for you what are the known poisons they put in vaccines, and I show you the research studies and the patents. These poisons cause infertility, and I show you how I know they know that and publish it. But they also publish what the cure is. There's 3 cures to the poisons that create infertility and miscarriages in a pregnant woman who receives a vaccine. And I would like to tell the world what those 3 things are, because I think that would be beneficial.
Let's do it.
Zinc is number 1. Mm-hmm. So supplementing 20 to 30 milligrams of zinc a day can reverse the detrimental effects and infertility effects of those poisons to restore you back to being fertile. Number 2 is using infrared saunas and getting your core body temperature, at least the outside of your body, up to 131 degrees Fahrenheit. And when you do that, it destroys that poison structure. It can no longer damage your fertility. And then the third thing is EDTA. So EDTA is a known detoxer of heavy metals and chemicals. And you use that. They publish zinc, and then EDTA, and then a specific temperature, 131 degrees. Now, I do want to say something, though. John Harvey Kellogg wrote a book. This is an incredible medical doctor and researcher. John Harvey Kellogg wrote a book in 1902 called The Light Therapeutics.
Sure.
You can still buy it.
Yeah.
Did you know that in that book, sorry, it's 1905 is the copyright. When you buy that book, he actually writes in there you can use red light therapy with the light bulbs he created in the 1890s to reverse lupus. He writes it. We can reverse lupus, diabetes, and we can actually cure the poisons that are referenced in all the DNA samples for COVID-19. Were cured in 1905 with red light. So
red light
out
or
in the sun,
or just outside.
go early morning or late evening.
Yeah.
That red light you see coming through the atmosphere is the curing light frequency for our bodies.
As a practice in our community, we heavily morning sun, evening suns. Like we as a team, we hit the beach every morning, and we do our morning practice, and almost every evening, almost everywhere we go in the world, it's super powerful. I'm super excited to dig in. I know your work from what I've heard. I haven't dug in really, and I'm going to dig in deeply now.
Please do.
I really appreciate all the energy that you put into this. It's a slippery slope right now in the world, with belief systems that are being doused by research, and it's very seldom that somebody comes through and cuts through with a research edge, because there's a lot of people saying, oh, they're all bad and this is why it's bad, and there's a lot of rumors about it, but really what we have to do is fight research with research.
Yes, we do.
And that's what you've done here, and this is really great.
Okay. One other thing too, if the world's worried about this, a lot of people reach out to us and tell us they are. There's a huge, massive amount of discussion about metals in the vaccines, like graphene oxide and then nanotech. Yeah. Did you know that the Spanish research group in Spain in September of 2024, just a few months ago, actually took dental anesthetics and Pfizer and Moderna's vaccines for COVID and dried them out over 30 days, looked underneath the microscope and videoed it, and they see thousands of microchips self-assembling, and they video it and they show you. Yeah. And then the researcher named Rafa Calvin, R-A-F-A Calvin, C-A-L-V-I-N, decides to do a study. He wants to actually do some research. He takes organic tobacco leaf, steeps it in water for 10 minutes, takes that water solution and drops it on all the slides.
Sure, and they disintermediate.
100% of all the nanotech is dissolved by the nicotine in the tobacco plant all by itself.
We're just back to
Within
this simple cure.
Simple cures. And they're solutions to everything they call COVID, everything they call COVID-19 vaccine injury, and they're laid out in the book, COVID-19 Lies.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
This has been really great, really interesting. I encourage everybody to grab the book, read it, and I think there's going to be a lot more discussion about this over the next couple of years.
Thank you very much.
Especially for what we're coming to.
I'm here to offer hope where we can.
Appreciate your time.
Appreciate you.